Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the opportunity to work on a Cardinal 752. It's a rear drag fishing reel. Two things on this reel. First one is that the spool does not come off. And secondly is there's no anti-reverse, and the anti-reverse switch is actually frozen. So these spools operate with a little forked spring in it. Normally you can push down the button to separate the fork to enable it to come out of the hold. There's a little fork that goes around a circle on the axle shaft, but sometimes they just get stuck. The best thing we can do and hope for is that this side plate will come off. We remove the axle shaft and we see what's going on from underneath. But that's not as critical in the operation of the reel. Yeah, you can't change the spool to a different spool, but you can still work the spool will work fine on the reel. The second issue that we have with this may be the one that's critical here. And so we'll start by taking off the exterior pieces and parts. We'll show you how this reel is made, how to service it if you have one, and what might interest you if you go to buy one of these. So it has the Abu badge on it, but I don't know if it was made in Sweden or not. I don't see anything here that says made in Sweden. And generally that means it wasn't made in Sweden. It's sort of like the pen reels, where if they don't say made in the US, they weren't made in the US, right? So as I take off these exterior pieces and parts, I just want to give a quick shout out and thanks to all of the healthcare workers, all of the uniformed services and first responders, and all of the essential people, personnel that are keeping us safe during the pandemic. Your efforts truly are appreciated. So I have 3 side plate screws. They're very small screws. And I use a parts tray to hold my pieces and parts so that I don't lose small pieces like this. So I use the bottom of a milk jug and I store everything that I take off in there. If it's a big part, maybe a spool or something, I can leave that off. I won't lose that piece. But you'd be surprised how many times I'll put a handle on my table and I won't be able to locate it quickly. So best to just kind of follow the process. Now, I did notice in each one of these cases that there's corrosion on the bottom of those screws. So I'm going to take a quick shot of penetrating oil just to help loosen that so that when we go to put it back in, they're clean and I don't have to worry about those rusting into the case. With those 3 screws off, we should be able to take this side plate off and see what's going on underneath. Well, we have dried grease. That's one thing that's going on underneath. Bushing on the side plate, so nothing important there. And what we want to do next is to remove that axle shaft. Let's see if we can get the main gear out. That would be good if we could. That much should come out. It's just seems to be stuck on the, there we go. So we can see probably what's happening with this. This is your anti-reverse. Not sure why this part is stuck. We're going to use some penetrating oil to loosen that up. And this has an anti-reverse that's spring driven off the back of the gear. So you'll see that there's a little tag end that falls out. That tag end needs to be in this slot here in order for it to work. Well, I put a little bit of penetrating oil on there. Let's see if we can move this up or down. There we go. Now we've got it moving again. So when you're in the up mode, you are in the active position for the anti-reverse, and when you're in the down mode, you're in the override. This one just looks like it got stuck. Penetrating oil is a nice answer for that. So in order to remove the axle shaft, you have to remove these little C-clips. Now I went ahead and I took my glove off because it's pretty hard to do this for me, and I need about as much feel as I can get. But there's 2 C-clips riding in the grooves of the axle shaft here. I removed the lower one. That way generally you can pick up on the higher one. And I use just 2 micro screwdrivers. You gotta watch these things. These things can shoot. I understand there's a tool out there. I don't have the tool, but I should look for that tool because it's not an easy task here removing those pieces. So once you remove that clip on the top end, which is in the case right now, you can pull out your axle shaft and you'll see those two slots where that clip rides. Before I lose that clip, I'm just going to come over here in the case and grab that. And this is the other C-clip I was referring to that has to be removed. Those go into my parts tray so I don't lose those. And now we have access to underneath. We have our crosswind block. We have our crosswind or oscillating gear. I'm going to put those into the tray. And we have a little 10 millimeter, I believe, up top here that we should be able to take off to get to that bearing underneath. Now you can try a standard wrench. This has a little bit of an offset on the box, and that one's working, so that's fine. If you don't have one, use a deep socket. That'll help you take it off. And make sure you note which way that nut turns. In this case, it was a traditional removal. We want to get here because we want to oil the bearing underneath. There's a bearing with a snap ring pliers in it, and you can go ahead and remove that snap ring if you have an issue. You can see the snap ring here. In this case, this is general maintenance. I just want to oil that bearing there, so I'm going to grab my fishing wheel oil, and I recommend that you do use fishing wheel oil, and just give that a good soak. Underneath here we have the pinion gear, which is the other side of this. I'm going to just make sure that that gets a good healthy dose of grease on it, just like that. We're going to check and inspect the back. We're going to clean this of the old grease. And this anti-reverse wasn't working because it appears that there was some grease buildup here. So I'm going to use a penetrating oil just to get that case, and we'll give that a, there you go, give that a ride up and down here. This was jammed before. And now you'll see we were able to move this in and out. And moving this in and out will set that anti-reverse. That's your override. That's your back off where it can come in. And that's going to grab the ridges on this click ratchet over here. So we should be able to solve that. All right, it's not much to this one. I do want to take the time to check underneath. Checking underneath means you have to take the screw out of the bottom. Let's go put all of these pieces into the tray so we don't lose those. Take this tray, the screw off the bottom of this. You should be able to pull this one right off. Or, yep, pull that right off. And this is your adjuster. You can walk that back. There's a little click knob here, so I'm going to also take that off. Just looking for my Phillips head screwdriver here. Seems to be a little bit of dirt in here. These are the things that will drive you crazy in reel repair, those little screws and the like. So we took that off. Now we should be able to remove the click that's holding this on. There's a U-clip here. Should pull right out, which it did. And now we should be able to back this out completely. No, may need the help of that adjuster there. There we go. Now these drags rarely fail. Most of the time there's just not a lot of use of these, and that's why they don't. But I just want to make sure that the whole mechanism is clean underneath here where we have the pressure. So I've noticed that there's some corrosion in here, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a bristle brush and get that out of the groove so that this continues to have an easy adjuster. And up top here you can see the slot where this is going to fall in, so let's go ahead and put that back in. And now it's clearly moving a lot easier than it was. And once this tightens up, we should be able to get this a hold down task here, clamp. Okay, once you've loaded that U-clip in, Just need to make sure that it's flush with the case. Now you can go ahead and put that cap back on. Simply screw that in. Oh, let's put this one back on first. This is that little click mechanism. It's going to let you hold tight on your setting. It's got a very small screw. I'm going to use the micro screwdriver and a dot of grease just to hold that better. Not an easy one to install. It needs to be perpendicular to the case and tighten down. We're all cleaned up there. We should just be able to press this on now. Put the screw in and that'll tighten that down. Remember, I pushed that all the way up to compress the drag stack there. That's why it's tight, and you can put the screw right in. Okay, then we want to come up here. We've oiled that. We've checked the interior, checked underneath, make sure that's nice and clean. We can go ahead and put this back on. So if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, if you leave that in the comments section, I do try to answer all of those questions. If you try to contact me by phone, that gets a little bit more difficult because, well, I'm in the shop a lot, and when I'm in the shop, that usually means I'm doing a video or I'm in the middle of a repair or something. And if that's the case, well, that phone goes unanswered. So if you can leave it in the comments section, that's the best way to get an answer on maybe what you're stuck with or whatever. A little bit of oil into both sides of the groove. You can also put some oil onto the line roller. Make sure that it snaps easily, which this one does. Next, install that oscillation block. Remember that there's two different sides of it. That has a kind of a canted or a angular piece on this side that rests under there. That's where taking pictures helps. Once we have that oscillation block and gear in place, we can turn our attention to the fun part of the piece, which is getting those little clips in through the gear after you've looped up the shaft. And the first one usually goes in easy because you have a lot of room to play with this. So I like to just get that one on before I set the other. You can usually do this with hand strength. This is one of those unnerving places where you can drop this thing and spend quite some time looking for it. So I like to get a little assist in putting that into the grooves. I'm going to use a needle nose pliers to do that. Then you can usually push it down with finger strength. If you need the pliers to do that, go right ahead. But most time, on the way in anyway, simply using your hand strength. Okay, when you've reset both of those C-clamps, go ahead and grab your main gear. That's got the little wire on it. You need to make sure that you can see the wire through the window. And then you want to line that wire up with the slot in that anti-reverse dog. So kind of position it so that the back end of the gear is going through that bushing in the back. Line your wire up with that slot by looking through the hole in the window. And then it should snap in. There we go. And you can get a visual confirmation that that little wire is in there. So what have we done? We've cleaned out the bottom of the drag stack. The drags were in good condition. We've cleaned out the interior body. We were unable to remove the spool. Persisted. I'm going to grab the side plate now. Go ahead and put the side plate nuts on. Screws. And then we'll give it a little bit of a test here. Okay, with that work completed, I did get the spool off. I want to show you how I did that. So these spools have a little lock collar on them. And if you turn the lock collar all the way counterclockwise, you will be able to remove the collar and that little click button. And underneath you'll see that we have that spool. We have a spring that releases going back and forth. And we have the little spring wedge in there that is going to wrap around the axle shaft here. So what you want to do is you want to come back in, line this up, the spring on this collar and everything is in the assembly, and load those points so that they line up inside that little spring. Get it set and then turn it clockwise to complete the task. Now that doesn't happen on all reels, but it happens on this reel. And then push your button, make sure that that works. Go ahead over and check your spool. You've got that on. Push button should release the spool now. So kind of a little trick on this one, and one that you'll know how to do. Remove that counterclockwise, square up the peg, clockwise circle, tightens it down. Problem solved. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed that. That's been a little crazy trip on this particular reel. Let's give it a test, make sure it works. Get the anti-reverse going, throw it into the override. That's fine. Got a little squeaky handle there. That's all that's left. A little bit of penetrating oil on that one will make that work. And that's how you solve the issues here. Just make sure your bail is clicking. There you go. So, please, everybody, stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.